My name's Tyler. I'm 32, live in a small house outside Dayton, Ohio, with my wife, Jenna, and our son, Max. We run a local auto detailing business with 6 employees and steady work. It's a far cry from a few years ago when life was rough. I delivered HVAC parts in a beat-up van for $3,200 a month. Jenna worked checkout at a grocery store. We lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment over a noisy diner. Max's 4th birthday was a homemade cake and plastic toys from the gas station. I never imagined that one phone call from my granddad, a retired pastor, would change everything. It was the week before Christmas 2023. I was on a delivery run in Indiana when Grandpa called. He invited us to the family Christmas dinner, a tradition he held every couple of years. Grandpa had 4 kids. My dad, Dean, who'd spent his career as a bank manager, and my 3 uncles, Tom, who owned a golf supply store, Greg, a real estate appraiser, and Rick, a high school coach. Dad had always looked down on me. I didn't work in finance like he wanted. Tom and Greg weren't much better. They saw my blue-collar job as something to mock. They were too busy comparing themselves to their vision of success to see anything of value in what I did. Jenna and I debated whether to go. We knew it was going to be emotionally exhausting, but Max had never met Grandpa, and I thought he deserved that chance. I didn't want him to grow up without a connection to his family. Jenna wasn't sure. "You really think they'll treat us any differently this time?" she asked, looking out the kitchen window. I hesitated. "I don't know, but we've got to try for Max." So we went. Jenna rubbed her temples like she was trying to shake off a headache. "You really think they'll treat us any differently this time?" she asked, voice tight. I leaned against the counter, glancing down at the phone in my hand. Grandpa's voice had cracked through the speaker like it always did, gravelly but warm. He'd always been the only one in the family who didn't judge me, who didn't look down on the way I made a living. "I don't know," I said, scrubbing a hand over my face. "But we've got to try. For Max." I tried to sound confident, but the doubt gnawed at me. The way my dad looked at me like I was a failure, how Tom and Greg made it clear they thought I was wasting my time on manual labor, that stuff wasn't easy to forget. Jenna crossed her arms and leaned back against the sink, staring at the floor. "I don't want to go just to be the punching bag for them. You know how they are." I sighed. "Yeah, I know." She didn't look up. "What's the point of sitting through a dinner if it's just going to be them making digs at you all night?" I felt the urge to snap, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not with Max playing in the other room. I wanted to say something like, "I'll stand up for us." But what good would that do? They'd already made their judgments. There was no changing their minds. I started, unsure how to put it into words. "I want Max to meet Grandpa, you know? I don't want him growing up without a connection to that side of the family." Jenna's eyes flicked up to meet mine. "And if they make it worse for him, I'll handle it." The words came out sharper than I intended. "We'll just get through it. It's one dinner." She didn't say anything, but I could see the hesitation in her eyes. I knew she didn't like the idea. Hell, I didn't either. But I also knew I couldn't back out now. Not after Grandpa had made the effort to reach out. Max's little voice drifted in from the other room, breaking the silence. "Mom, where's my drawing?" Jenna's face softened at the sound of his excitement. She gave me a tight smile and pushed off the sink. "I'll go help him. You okay?" "Yeah," I said, but I wasn't sure I was. The idea of facing that family again, especially with Max there, felt like walking into a room full of sharks. It wasn't long before Jenna and I had Max dressed in his little sweater vest and khakis, the picture he'd drawn for Grandpa tucked in his hand. I could tell he was excited, which helped ease some of my nerves. If nothing else, I wanted him to have a good time. We drove to Columbus that night, the whole time in silence. The thought of what awaited us kept swirling in my head. Dad's cold stare, Tom's smirk, Greg's voice laced with fake sympathy. I couldn't escape it, couldn't forget how they treated me, no matter how much I wanted to pretend everything would be fine. Grandpa's house came into view like a big, looming thing as we drove through a quiet, well-kept neighborhood. The Christmas lights on the porch were bright, welcoming in that cold December air. Max bounced in his seat, clearly excited, holding his drawing close to his chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. I told myself to put on a smile, to make it through the night. For Max, we pulled into Grandpa's driveway, and Max immediately perked up. His little hand clutched the drawing he'd made for Grandpa, his eyes wide with excitement. He was so damn innocent, so eager to meet a man he'd never known, and I couldn't help but feel a pang in my chest. I wanted this night to be good for him. The house was huge, one of those old brick places with fancy, wrought iron railings and too many rooms to count. It looked like the kind of place where you were supposed to be impressed, but all I felt was a sinking feeling in my stomach. We walked in, and the noise hit me right away. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. About 30 people filled the house, Some of them I recognized, others I didn't. The air was thick with expensive perfume and cologne. Everyone was already into their second or third drink, and I knew what that meant. It wasn't going to be pretty. Max tugged at my sleeve as we walked through the crowded hallway, looking up at me with a mix of confusion and wonder. He wasn't used to this many people. We didn't even make it into the main room before the first jab landed. Mark, one of my cousins, gave a half laugh, half snort. "You still scraping bugs off windshields for a living?" he asked, loud enough for a few people nearby to overhear. I clenched my jaw but didn't say anything. There was no point in responding, not when I knew how this night was going to go. "Come on, Max," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I could feel the tension creeping up my neck. Jenna wrapped an arm around his shoulders as we tried to navigate through the throng of people, looking for a spot to sit. My dad was standing near the back of the room, holding court with some of the cousins. As we got closer, he glanced over and stood up, his eyes flicking over me with that cold, judgmental look I'd grown too familiar with. "Chairs are for folks with real careers," he said, voice flat, eyes never leaving mine. A few people chuckled, the laughter tight and forced. I felt Max's small hand slip into mine, and when I glanced down, I saw that his little face was scrunched up, trying to figure out why no one was being nice. "Dad," I started, but before I could say more, Uncle Tom, standing a few feet away, couldn't help himself. "Manual labor," he scoffed, shaking his head. "I don't know how you can live like that, Tyler. Must be real tough, scraping dirt off the side of cars all day." Greg, who'd been standing next to him with a glass of wine, chipped in with his usual brand of condescension. "What a waste of a diploma," he said, giving me that fake sympathetic smile. "You could have been doing something with your life, instead of this." My stomach twisted, but I could feel every inch of me tightening up, like I was a ticking time bomb, ready to go off. Max was still looking up at me, and I knew he could feel the shift in the air. He didn't understand what was going on, just that it didn't feel right. I wanted to shout back, to tell them all how wrong they were, how hard I worked to get us out of that shitty apartment, how every hour I spent working in that shop meant more for my family than any suit-and-tie job ever could. But the words caught in my throat. And then I saw Jenna. Her face was pale, her arms wrapped tightly around Max, like she was trying to shield him from the storm around us. She gave me a small, almost apologetic look. I swallowed hard. This wasn't the time to get into it. Not with Max standing there, looking confused and scared. I bent down to his level, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Hey, buddy," I said softly. "How about we go grab some cookies, huh? Let's see if Grandpa has any." Max's face brightened a little. "Cookies?" he asked, his voice hopeful. "Yeah, cookies," I said, giving him a half smile. I wanted to get him out of there, away from the stairs, away from the insults. Jenna nodded, and we made our way toward the kitchen. But I could feel the weight of their eyes on my back, their judgment like a cold, invisible hand pressing down on me. The laughter from the living room grew louder, and I hated how it sounded. Hated how it always made me feel like I was less than them, like I didn't belong. Max and I got the cookies, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the night had already been ruined. I could have walked out right then, but I stayed. For Max, for Jenna, because this was supposed to be about family, right? But all I was getting was humiliation. I stood there in the kitchen, Max clutching his cookies, Jenna trying to smile like none of this was happening, but I could feel the weight of the room pressing in on me. It didn't matter that we were in the kitchen now, away from the rest of them. I could still hear the laughter from the living room, the sharpness of those insults echoing in my head. Max took a bite of his cookie and looked up at me. "Is Grandpa gonna eat cookies too?" I smiled at him, even though my gut was a mess. "Yeah, buddy, we'll go find him in a minute, okay?" But just as I was about to take a deep breath, the door to the hallway opened, and Uncle Rick stepped into the room. "Enough," he snapped, cutting through the tension like a knife. Everyone froze. Uncle Rick was the only one in the family who wasn't a complete asshole. He was the only one who ever treated me like I was a person, not some failure. But even he didn't look too sure of himself right now. "They're not worth it, Rick," my dad called from the other room. "Let it go." Rick's face tightened, his eyes flashing with frustration. "No, you don't get it. This has gone far enough." He turned to me. "Tyler, just sit tight, all right? I'll handle this." I didn't know what he was going to do, but it wasn't good. I could see that much. The room fell silent, and I felt it, the coldness creeping back in. Everyone was watching us. No one spoke, not even Mark, who usually couldn't help himself. And then Grandpa appeared. His slow, deliberate steps down the hallway felt like the march of something final. He stood there for a moment, looking around at all of us, his eyes flicking over the crowd. There was a quiet power about him, even in his old age. But tonight, he looked distant, almost cold. "Let's take a vote," Grandpa said, his voice low but steady. "Who thinks Tyler should leave?" For a moment, I thought he was joking. I mean, it didn't make sense. This was my family. My grandfather, of all people, was supposed to be the one who understood. But the room didn't laugh. The room didn't shift uncomfortably. Instead, they all stared at me with their stone-cold faces. One by one, the hands started to go up. My dad's hand was the first, then Tom, then Greg. Mark, of course, raised his hand, followed by a few cousins who'd probably never even said more than a couple of words to me in their lives. The hands kept rising. 30 people in that room, and I thought maybe 5 or 6 of them would keep their hands down. But no, 28 hands, 28 out of 30, were raised. It felt like the ground dropped out from under me. I looked at Jenna, and her face was pale, her eyes wide. She was holding Max tight against her chest, and I could see her trying to keep herself together. Her lips trembled. She wasn't crying yet, but I knew it wouldn't take much. Jenna, I started, but she just shook her head. She didn't want Max to see her break down. I could tell she was struggling to keep her emotions in check. Uncle Rick exploded. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted, his voice rising. "You can't be serious." Grandpa didn't flinch, didn't even seem surprised. He just stood there, looking at Rick with an empty expression. "Let's finish this vote," Grandpa said, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it before. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was tight. My body felt heavy, like I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Max tugged on my sleeve. "Daddy, why's everyone so mad?" I forced a smile, but it felt hollow, fake. "It's okay, buddy. Let's just stay calm." But it wasn't okay. It wasn't even close. Rick wasn't backing down. He stepped forward, face red, fists clenched. "Dad, this is insane. You've gone too far." Grandpa didn't respond. He just watched Rick, his face unmoving. I felt the anger rise in me, but what good would it do? What was the point? They'd made their decision. All I could do was take it, take the humiliation, and get the hell out of there. Jenna's eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the same pain I felt. The kind of pain you get when your own family turns on you, when the people you thought were supposed to love you the most just don't. And then, all at once, my stomach dropped. Not from the anger, not from the insults, but from something deeper, something that cut worse than anything they could throw at me. They didn't just think I didn't belong. They were voting me out. I stood there, barely able to breathe, watching as my family, my own flesh and blood, voted me out of the room. My stomach twisted in a way I couldn't explain. The weight of their judgment settled over me like a blanket of ice. I was out, cast aside like I didn't matter, like everything I'd worked for meant nothing to them. Jenna held Max tight, her face pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. I couldn't look at her. Not yet. The shame of what was happening in front of my son was too much. I turned to leave, thinking it was finally over, that I'd had enough. My hand was on the doorknob, when Grandpa's voice suddenly cut through the tension. "Stop right there," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I froze, heart slamming against my chest. I didn't know what to expect. More insults, more ridicule. But when I turned around, I saw Grandpa standing in the doorway, his posture straight, his face hard. The whole room fell silent, everyone watching him like he was about to make some kind of announcement. Grandpa's voice was low but unwavering. "The ones leaving tonight are not Tyler. It's all of you with your hands raised." I blinked, not sure I'd heard him right. The room went dead quiet, a thick, suffocating silence hanging over everyone. "What?" my dad said, his voice shaking. He was the first to speak up, but it wasn't anger. It was fear. Grandpa didn't move, didn't flinch. He just kept staring at my dad, then my uncles, then everyone who had raised their hand against me. "Get out," Grandpa said, his voice firm, each word like a hammer coming down. I could see my dad's face twist in confusion, his mind racing to catch up. "What are you talking about? This is a lesson, a family lesson." Grandpa didn't even look at him. "No, you've mocked a man who gave up everything to keep this family afloat." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My legs felt weak, but I stood still, not sure what to do with myself. My dad, the man who had spent my entire life telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't worthy of anything, was being called out. The rest of the family was dead silent, unsure of what to do, who to look at. I could see the confusion in their faces, the panic. This wasn't the script they'd expected. Grandpa wasn't done. He turned his gaze back to me, and his voice softened, just enough for me to hear the depth of what he was saying. "When Tyler was 18, he began, the weight of his words pulling everyone's attention back to him. His father went broke. Tyler didn't have the luxury of ignoring his responsibilities." My heart was pounding. I wanted to shrink into the floor. Grandpa looked directly at my dad as he spoke. "Tyler dropped out of school to work, to send money home. When no one else could, he kept this family afloat." I could see the look on my dad's face, the realization, the guilt that he tried to hide behind anger for all these years. "You've never once acknowledged that, have you?" Grandpa's voice rang out, each word cutting through the silence. "Not once did you thank your son for what he did, for how he kept you from losing everything." The room was so quiet, It was suffocating. I could feel everyone staring at me, but this time it was different. They weren't mocking me. They were seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. But it wasn't enough to undo the years of resentment, the years of me being the one they left behind. I didn't know if anything could. For a long moment, no one said anything. My dad's face was a mask of disbelief, like he couldn't process the truth. Greg shifted uncomfortably on his feet. Tom looked around, probably trying to find a way out of the conversation. Finally, my dad broke the silence. His voice was tight, almost pleading. We didn't mean to. Grandpa's gaze snapped to him, hard and unforgiving. You never meant to, Dean. That's the problem. A cold, uncomfortable stillness settled over the room. My dad didn't speak again. None of them did. For the first time in my life, someone stood up for what I'd done. Not just what I'd done for my family, but for everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd worked for. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pride, exactly, but it was close enough. Jenna looked at me, her eyes wet but relieved. She mouthed, "Thank you," to Grandpa. I didn't know if she was thanking him for standing up for me, or for finally giving me something I could hold on to. But in that moment, it felt like both. Max tugged at my sleeve, breaking the silence. "Daddy, can we go now?" I looked down at him, my heart heavy. "Yeah, buddy, we can go." Grandpa's eyes softened, and he nodded at me, his approval quiet but real. And for the first time all night, I didn't feel like I was the one who was losing. I barely processed what Grandpa had just said. My mind was still spinning, still reeling from everything that had just unfolded when he dropped the bombshell. "I sold part of my property," Grandpa said, his voice still steady, like he wasn't talking about a life-changing decision. "The land's worth $4 million. It was going to be split 10 ways. But now, it'll only go to Rick and Tyler." The room erupted in disbelief. I felt like I was watching everything happen from a distance, like I wasn't even a part of it. "Wait, what?" My dad's voice cracked, disbelief turning into anger. "What do you mean, only Rick and Tyler? That's not how this works." Grandpa didn't flinch. "That's exactly how it works. You've lost your right to this estate the moment you decided Tyler wasn't good enough." The anger in my dad's eyes flared. "You're making a mistake, Dad," he spat, his voice low but sharp. "I'm your son. I've been your son for over 50 years. And now, you're giving it all to them?" His finger jabbed in Rick in my direction. Uncle Tom stood up next, his face turning red with rage. "You're out of your mind, Jim. This is our inheritance. You can't just change the will because you're pissed off." Grandpa's eyes narrowed, hard as stone. "You don't deserve a cent." And just like that, the room shifted. The smug confidence my dad, uncles, and cousins had carried with them all night crumbled. Their faces flushed with panic as they tried to regain control, but it was too late. "Look, Dad," my Uncle Greg said, his voice trembling. "This is insane. You can't seriously mean it. There has to be a way." Grandpa's gaze cut him off. "The way's been clear for years, Greg. I'm done enabling this family. You had your chances. You all had your chances." One of my cousins, a guy I barely knew, stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. "Uncle Jim, please. We didn't mean what we said. It was a joke, right? A family joke. Save it." Grandpa snapped. "You've all mocked Tyler for years. You've all treated him like he was beneath you, like he was nothing. Well, now you're going to pay the price." I just stood there, numb. Grandpa kept talking, but I couldn't focus on anything except the chaos unfolding around me. My dad and uncles, who had spent my whole life making me feel like I was less than them, were now pleading, begging. It felt unreal, like I was watching some twisted version of reality. "I don't need your forgiveness," Grandpa said, his voice rising. "You've made your choice. Now, you'll live with it." He looked at Rick and me. "You'll get the rest of the estate in 2 days. The farm. It's yours, just like the land is." I could barely breathe. Rick didn't seem surprised, but he looked stunned, his eyes wide as he took in what Grandpa had just said. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone muttered, "This is crazy." And that was it. The first to leave was my dad. His face twisted with a mixture of rage and shame, but he didn't say another word. He just stormed out, followed by Tom, Greg, and a few of my cousins, all of them arguing in low voices, but I couldn't hear the words. The sound of their footsteps as they left the house was the only thing that cut through the stillness. I felt like I was in some kind of fog, watching it all unfold but not really able to take it in. Jenna squeezed my hand, holding Max close to her chest. I could feel her breathing, steady but shaken. Max, oblivious to everything that had just happened, tugged at my sleeve. "Are we going to go see Grandpa now?" he asked, his innocent little face lighting up with hope. I looked down at him, trying to pull myself together, but it felt like my insides had been hollowed out. "Yeah, buddy, we're going to see Grandpa." But as I stood there, holding my son close, watching the last of the family walk out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something deep inside me had changed. I wasn't sure if it was because I had just seen the end of the family I thought I knew, or if it was because, for the first time, I had something they couldn't take from me. My mind was spinning, and my hands felt cold, but there was one thing I knew for sure. Nothing was ever going to be the same. By the time the last of the family left, the house felt eerily quiet. The weight of it all settled in the corners of the room, thick and suffocating. I didn't know what to say, what to do. Jenna was still holding Max, trying to comfort him, but it was hard to pretend things were fine when everything felt broken. Grandpa didn't say much. He just looked at me, then at Rick, his face unreadable. It wasn't anger that I saw in his eyes, but something else, something harder. Then, without warning, he broke the silence. "Let's get to work," Grandpa said, his voice calm, almost businesslike. "There's still a lot of Christmas left to give." I blinked, not sure I'd heard him right. After everything that had just happened, all the tension and the chaos, he was acting like nothing had changed. He didn't even seem shaken by the fallout. "Work?" I asked, my voice a little rough. "Grandpa, with everything going on." "Doesn't matter," he interrupted, cutting me off gently but firmly. "We've got a lot of food here, and people who need it. We're not just going to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to help." Rick looked at me, eyes wide but understanding. He didn't say anything, just nodded. Aunt Lisa, who had been mostly quiet through the whole ordeal, spoke up then. "He's right. Let's put this to good use." It took a second for my brain to process, but when it did, something clicked. Maybe it was the way Grandpa was taking control, or maybe it was the way Max was still clutching his drawing, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. Whatever it was, I found myself nodding along. "We'll box up the catering," I said, finally starting to feel like I could do something, anything, to make the night feel a little less lost. So we packed up all the untouched food: turkey, mashed potatoes, rolls, pies. It felt like we were all moving in slow motion, but at least we were moving. We filled bags, loaded up the car, and set out into the night. We drove downtown to a part of the city I hadn't been to in years. The streets were quieter than usual, but the shelters were still active. People were still out there, huddled together against the cold, looking for food, for warmth, for any kind of kindness. Max was wide-eyed, his little hand clutching mine as we started handing out food. He helped me with the cookies, carefully placing them into the hands of men and women who looked tired but grateful. I could see the way their faces softened when they took the cookies from Max's outstretched hands. He smiled at them, completely unaware of the weight of what was happening around us. To him, it was just a simple gift, a little treat. But to them, it was something more. Grandpa stood by, chatting with the people, shaking hands, talking to them like they were people who mattered. He didn't treat them like they were invisible or beneath him. He listened to their stories, shared a laugh or two, and gave them a little piece of his warmth. And something about watching him do that made it feel like maybe, just maybe, everything wasn't as bad as it seemed. Max beamed as he handed out another cookie, his face lighting up with joy. I hadn't seen him smile like that in a while. His innocence, his willingness to just give without question, made the night feel better than it had any right to. "This is the best Christmas ever, huh, Daddy?" Max asked, his voice full of wonder. I looked at him, his eyes shining in the dim light of the street lamp, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a real sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from winning or from getting something I wanted. It was something deeper, something real. It was the kind of peace that came from doing the right thing, even when everything else around you was falling apart. When we got back to Grandpa's house, Max ran straight to the living room with his drawing, all excited to give it to Grandpa. It was crumpled at the edges from being shoved in his pocket, but Grandpa didn't care. He took one look at it, and his eyes softened. "That's a great picture, Max," he said, smiling wide. "I'm going to put this up where everyone can see it." And just like that, he walked over to the wall, found a spot, and hung it up with care, like it was the most precious thing in the room. Max stood next to him, beaming with pride. "Now it's there forever," he said, his voice filled with excitement. I watched them both, feeling the weight of the last few hours lift off my shoulders. Things might have been broken in ways I couldn't fix, but for tonight, at least, there was something I could hold on to. And that felt like enough. As we left Grandpa's house later, with Max fast asleep in the back seat, I knew this Christmas was something I'd never forget. It wasn't about the money, or the family, or the fights. It was about finding something good, something real, even when it seemed like there was nothing left. And that was more than enough. The next morning, after the chaos had settled and the house felt empty, Grandpa called Rick and me into the study. It was just the three of us, standing there, still processing everything that had happened the night before. The air in the room was thick, but Grandpa didn't waste time with small talk. "I sold the property. The money's in the bank," Grandpa said, handing Rick and me a set of paperwork. $2 million each. "It's yours." I stared at the papers in my hand, feeling a mix of disbelief and gratitude. I wasn't sure I'd ever get used to the idea that this was real, that my life had just shifted on a dime. Rick took the papers without a word, his face calm as ever, but I could tell he was processing the same whirlwind I was. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Grandpa, though I knew the answer. Grandpa nodded, leaning back in his chair. "It's done. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I've seen enough to know what matters. You too. You've earned this. Don't waste it." I could barely wrap my head around it. $2 million. The weight of that number hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. "Thank you." I managed, my voice rough. I looked at Rick, trying to steady myself. "I don't even know what to say." Grandpa smiled, his face softening. "I didn't give it to you to say thank you. I gave it to you to do something with it. Make it count." That was all the motivation I needed. I didn't want to screw this up. I wanted to show them all that I could do something with the chance I'd been given. I enrolled in a 12-week business program at the local community college right away. I didn't have much time to waste, and I needed to learn everything I could about managing what I was about to build. I learned the basics: cash flow, profit margins, client relations, stuff I should have known before I ever started my detailing business. But better late than never, right? Once I had the knowledge, it was time to get to work. I leased a small garage space, a rough 2,000 square foot building on the edge of town. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. I painted the walls, bought some new equipment, and hired 2 part-time detailers, guys who were experienced and hungry, just like I was. We started small. My first clients were local dealerships, places that needed a reliable, quality detailer, but didn't want to pay the premium prices that the big companies charged. We worked our asses off, washing cars, polishing, waxing. Slowly, our reputation grew, one car at a time. We picked up fleet owners and RV clients, people who needed consistent, regular work. Rick helped with the paperwork, the contracts, the legal stuff that I knew nothing about. He had the background in that, and I was smart enough to lean on him. Grandpa coached me through some of the bigger business deals, his advice solid and no nonsense. Just like him, he told me to always keep my word, to never take shortcuts, and to always put the work first. In less than a year, things started clicking. We had 6 employees, multiple service vans, and consistent contracts with businesses that relied on us. The cash flow was good. Not great yet, but steady. And steady was a hell of a lot better than what I'd been used to. I knew the hard work was just beginning. This wasn't a get-rich-quick situation. There were days when I felt like I was drowning in invoices and scheduling issues. But there was something different this time. I wasn't doing it for them. I wasn't trying to prove anything to my dad or uncles anymore. I was doing it for myself, for Jenna, and for Max. When we got our first big contract, a fleet deal with a local trucking company, I knew we were on the right track. It was one of those moments where you look back and realize everything up until that point had been leading to this. I called Rick, my voice tight with excitement. "We did it, man. This is the start of something big." Rick didn't say much, just a low chuckle on the other end. "Told you we'd get there." I hung up, feeling the weight of it all for the first time. How far I'd come and how much further I still had to go. But I wasn't scared anymore. Whatever came next, I knew I was ready. And as long as I had Grandpa's guidance, Rick's support, and the drive to keep moving forward, I knew I could make this work. It had been just over a year since the business really started picking up. The new house was everything Jenna and I had worked for, and Max had his own room now, a little corner of the house where he could run around and let his imagination take over. Things were finally settling into a routine. And then, one cold November afternoon, my dad showed up on the doorstep. I hadn't heard from him in months. Not since the vote. Not since Grandpa had made his decision. I honestly didn't expect to see him again, at least not until he needed something. And when he showed up, I knew exactly what it was. He wasn't alone. Trent, his old friend, stood next to him, wearing that same smug look he always had, the one that made you feel like he thought he was smarter than everyone else. "Tyler," Dad started, his voice strained but trying to sound casual. "We've got a situation. A big one." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, giving them both a hard look. "What kind of situation?" Dad hesitated for a second, his eyes darting to Trent, who finally spoke up. "We need $300,000. We're about to lose the house. The bank's foreclosing. We've got no way out." I didn't move, didn't react at first. My mind was already racing, but I had to keep my cool. "And you're coming to me?" Trent stepped forward, his voice smoother now, trying to sell me on the idea. "Look, Tyler, we know things have been tense in the past, but this is family. We're asking for a loan, not a handout. You've got the money now. We just need a little help to get back on track." I felt the anger rise in me, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't going to let them see that. Instead, I leaned in closer, locking eyes with my dad. "If you can tell me my birthday, I'll help you." They both froze. It was a simple question, one that should have been the easiest thing in the world for my father to answer. The silence stretched on, long and painful. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Trent shifted uncomfortably next to him, but neither of them said anything. "You don't even remember," I said quietly. "You can't even remember the day your own son was born." Dad's face reddened. I could see the frustration building in him, but there was nothing he could do. He wasn't going to say it. He couldn't. Without another word, I turned and shut the door. No yelling, no drama, just the sound of the lock clicking into place. I stood there for a long time, my hand still on the knob. I could hear Trent and Dad talking outside, but I didn't care. They were gone, and the truth was, I was done with them. Later that night, after Max was asleep, I sat down with Jenna in the kitchen. The weight of the moment still hung heavy. "That was hard," I said, running a hand through my hair. Jenna nodded, her eyes tired but understanding. "But you did the right thing, Tyler. They don't get to come back into our lives just because they need something." I stared at the table, thinking about how different everything was now, how far we'd come, and how much we'd had to leave behind. "We're not doing this for them," I said, my voice firm. "We're doing it for Max. For us. We don't need to prove anything to them." Jenna squeezed my hand. "No showing off, no ego. Just build something that matters." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. That's what it was all about now. Not the money, not the inheritance, just building something that would last, something we could pass on to Max without all the baggage of the past. The next day, I changed my phone number. Jenna did the same. We only kept Grandpa's number, Rick's, and a few close friends who had supported us through it all. I knew my dad wouldn't call again, at least not for anything real. And in a strange way, that was okay. It's been almost 2 years now. We're in a quiet neighborhood with decent-sized yards and no drama. Max is in 2nd grade, and he's thriving. He's got a few good friends, and every morning, I drive him to school while Jenna handles the books for the business. She's become an integral part of everything we do, managing the finances, keeping things organized, making sure the wheels keep turning smoothly. I don't know what I'd do without her. On weekends, we drive over to Grandpa's place, like we always do. Max loves spending time with him, and I know Grandpa gets a kick out of it. The drawing he made for him, crumpled edges and all, still hangs proudly on the wall in his living room. It's a reminder of how far we've come and how much we've gained, even if it's not the kind of gain the world would recognize. Rick and I are talking shop constantly now. Expansion, hiring, fleet management. It's not just about getting by anymore. We've got a team, we've got contracts lined up, and we're actually looking ahead. My days are full, but they're full of work I can be proud of. We're making decisions, running operations, and actually building something, piece by piece. Business is steady. Some days it feels like we've already made it, like we're finally playing in the big leagues. And honestly, it feels good. It feels right, but it also feels earned. Every late night, every weekend spent sorting out logistics or chasing down clients. It's been worth it. I finally feel proud of what I've built. I don't miss the old family, not in the way I thought I would. They were never really family to me, not the way they should have been. They were a reminder of everything I wasn't, of all the ways I failed in their eyes. And now, I don't need them. I've got enough. I've got Jenna, I've got Max, and I've got a life that feels like mine. Maybe it's justice. Maybe it's luck. I don't know. But what I do know is this. I earned my peace, and I'll protect it. I won't let anyone come back in and shake it up, not now that I've finally found it. Not even for them.